Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So, today I'm going to continue my discussion about whether or not biracial people are black. So, in my last video, I received quite a few comments, and someone actually posted a video where they raised counter arguments to the arguments that I raised. So, I want to take time out now to respond to a lot of those comments in this video. So, the first thing that is very important to understand when we're discussing the question of race, we must understand that race is a social construct, that blackness is a social construct. It is not a real scientific concept because when you look at genetics, human beings have far more in common than they have differences. And this was revealed in the Human Genome Project. I will include links to articles dealing with the Human Genome Project. So race is not a genetic thing. It is not a biological thing. It is a social construct. And in this society, operating under that social construct of race, biracial people are viewed as black. They always have been viewed that way within this American society. So regardless of how that individual views themselves, regardless of how a particular faction within society views biracial people, the fact of the matter is that the larger society views them and treats them as if they are black people. That's the bottom line. Whether you like it or not, that's the reality. And I'm going to provide a couple of concrete examples of what I'm talking about. The first example is this. During slavery, the slave master would enslave his own children. So if he had offspring with one of his slaves, and those offspring were biracial or whatever, those children would be enslaved right along with the rest of the black people on that plantation. So even beginning in slavery, biracial people were oppressed and enslaved just like black people were. Just like, the rest of the black race. So they were treated the same. And if you look at the case of Plessy versus Ferguson, that's another prime example of what I'm talking about. In that case, you had a man who was only a quarter black. And this man was subjected to the same discrimination that other black people were subjected to. So no matter how this man defined himself, no matter the fact that he only had a fourth of his blood was black, that man was subject to discrimination. And it was out of that case, Plessy versus Ferguson, that the court decided that separate but equal was the law of the land. That basically enshrined and institutionalized the concept of Jim Crowism and segregation and just all-out oppression of black people. It received legal sanction. So under Jim Crow, the segregation laws applied to biracial people as well as full black people. So for all intents and purposes, biracial people were treated and viewed as black. They were subjected to the no colored signs just like the rest of us. They were forced to sit at the back of the bus just like the rest of us. They were lynched just like the rest of us, killed just like the rest of us, castrated just like the rest of us. They were subjected to the same experience as the rest of the black community. So for all intents and purposes, society viewed them and treated them as black, treated them as niggers. And that continues today. And a prime example of that would be the presidency of Barack Obama. Here you had a man who was highly educated, went to the best law school in the country, was a president of the Harvard Law Review, a man who would become a distinguished author, a man who would become a U.S. Senator and later a President of the United States. Despite all of those accomplishments, that brother was still viewed as a brother. That brother was still treated and viewed as black. He was treated, despite all of his accomplishments, despite him being quote unquote half white, he was treated just like a nigger. I mean, you can tell that he was treated like that when you look at, for instance, those Tea Party rallies. At those rallies, they had posters and signs depicting the President of the United States, Barack Obama, and his family as apes, as monkeys, as chimps. They had pictures depicting this brother as some primitive witch doctor. You had this brother giving a State of the Union address, and you had one of these Southern cracker congressmen yell out and call this brother a liar during that address as it was broadcast, basically showing his complete contempt for this brother because he's a brother, because he's a black man. They viewed him as a nigger. These people demanded that this brother produce his paperwork. They demanded to see his birth certificate. If that's not nigger treatment, I don't know what is. They viewed him and they treated him as if he was a nigger, as if he was black. It's just as plain and simple. So you can have all these abstract conversations about somebody being half black and half white and how they're not a part of the black family as long as you want. But this oppressive, racist society in which we live still views them as black. And as long as you live in this society, you operate within this society. And I think it is delusional. I think it is silly for us to not take reality into account, for us to pretend like we live outside of this society. Now, some have suggested that biracial peoples should be subjected to special vetting. They should be subjected to a stricter standard of review before we embrace them as individuals. And frankly, I think that that's just a manifestation of prejudice and bigotry, where you're judging somebody based solely on the fact that they had one parent that was white. You're judging them based solely on that. And, I just think that that's fundamentally wrong. Because one's loyalty can't be based on the fact that they had one parent that was white. Because you have plenty of dark-skinned black people who have both parents who are black. But these same people have betrayed the black community. People like Clarence Thomas, a man who, when given an opportunity, will use that opportunity to rule against the interests of his people every time. We have a long history of turncoats in our community, agents in our community who collaborate with our enemy. And this idea that that's limited to biracial people is absurd, because often these traitors amongst us are some of the darker skinned black people. So I think that instead of prejudging people based solely on the complexion of their skin, based solely on the fact that one of their parents is white, we need to judge all people based on their intentions and based on their conduct, period. And I think by imposing, these different standards for biracial people, by denying that they are black, essentially what we're doing is alienating those people. people that could be beneficial to our struggle. I mean, judging by the standards that a lot of these people have used, many great people like W.E.B. Du Bois would have been denied a chance to be instrumental in our struggle for black liberation. People like Frederick Douglass, a man of mixed race background, a great revolutionary abolitionist. I mean, that brother would have, I mean, what are we going to do? Turn down people like that, people that are committed to the struggle, say that they're not black, say that they can't contribute and they can't speak on black issues? To me, that's simply retarded. That's simply stupid. You know, because when you look at the standard of blackness in terms of, if you look at blackness or you define it as pure, like with no mixing of any other race, none of us, practically none of us, are black by that definition. African Americans are a mixed race people because of the legacy of slavery, because of the legacy of Jim Crow, because of the legacy of even integration. Many of us are of mixed race. I mean, judging by that standard, somebody like a Malcolm X, you would say, well, he's not black because his mother was biracial. A brother who has proven his dedication to black people, a brother who gave his life for black people, you would say, well, he's not fully black. I mean, I just think that this whole thing, you know, this whole dispute is an example of the absurdity of this concept of race. And then some people brought up this issue of interracial dating and marriage, trying to say that if you identify biracial people as black, then somehow you have to support or condone interracial dating. And all that is a deflection. You know, all that is a red herring that is completely irrelevant to the core issue, which is whether or not biracial people are black. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, not just going by the social construct, if a biracial person identifies with their blackness and they have demonstrated their commitment to the people, then they are black, period. There's no need for some elaborate debate or discussion as far as I'm concerned. And I'll just conclude by making this point. You know, these same people that are purists, you know, these people that say you got to be 100% African, these people are, for all intents and purposes, emulating the very people they claim to hate so much. They claim to hate the white man so much, but they exercise and they practice the very same bigotry of that white man. That white man alienated biracial people, and so do these so-called purists. Just like the white man, they prejudge these biracial people just like the white man prejudges black people. And I think that that is a prime example of how these people that are so pure and, you know, quote unquote purists in their perspective, they are becoming the very thing that they despise. So those are my comments about this issue. Tell me what you think. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Peace.